Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today for Hacking Perforce, extending P4V and Swarm for better development. We've got a ton of content today, so I'd like to get started right away. We're lucky to have Matt Attaway here with us today. He's the open source community manager at Perforce, and he's been here since practically the beginning. So we're lucky to have him, and he's excited to tell you about ways that you can extend both P4V and Swarm for better development with your team. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today to talk about hacking Perforce, or at least hacking Perforce GUIs. My name is Matt Attaway. I'm an engineer here at Perforce. I've been here for 13 years, and I've kind of made a career of making small, interesting tools to expand on what Perforce does. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about how we can do that inside the bounds of P4V and Swarm. So the first question going into this is why? Why do we want to do this? If you've heard me give a talk before, you'll know that I have a firm belief that there's no such thing as the perfect version control system. Not Perforce, not Mercurial, not Git, not any of them. And the reason why is they don't understand the special tools and processes that you use to get your job done. So you think about it, if you built your own version control tool from scratch, you would probably build all those tools and all those ways of communicating straight into the tool. But building a version control system is far from trivial, so the next best thing that we can do is to integrate those tools and those processes into the version control tool as tightly as possible. So the two big reasons we want to do that are to increase user productivity and happiness, because productive users make more good stuff for us, and that's all that we all have to sell and make money with, so yay productivity. And happy users they're happy and they're then more productive, and back to the more money part. And also to improve process compliance. Just like in the medical industry, they're always looking for techniques and tools to help with medical compliance, to make sure people are taking their medication or following through with their exercises. In the software industry, we need ways to help people stay compliant with our processes that are important for making sure software or whatever we build makes it out the other end in one piece and with the quality levels we expect. So by hacking these GUIs, by modifying them to suit our needs, we can get that process compliance that we desperately need. And making that easy, then again, makes users productive and happy. So everyone wins. So today we're going to be talking about modifying or extending two tools here at Perforce. And these are kind of front ends for us. The first is going to be P4V, which is our flagship GUI. That runs on multiple platforms. Probably you're all familiar with that one. We're also going to talk about the new kid on the block, Swarm, which is our code collaboration platform. If you're not familiar with that, I'll give a very brief tour before we dive into how to extend it. But it provides activity feeds of all the activity that's going on in your system, provides project views so that you can actually see what code goes together and who's working on that. And it also provides an asset review system, so you can review mostly code, but also assets such as designs and art objects, and have conversations about them. So let's dive into P4V. Now in doing this, just a warning, we only have 20 minutes for this talk, and I've probably already eaten up 3 or 4. So I'm going to move pretty quickly between all of the different extensions. At the very end, I'm going to give a link to you that will take you to a single place that has all the documentation you need to extend either P4V or Swarm. So don't try to look at the nuts and bolts of how this is done. I'm not really going to cover that. I'm really just going to give an overview of what you can do in each system. So hold on to your hats. Let's dive in. So first off, P4V, flagship GUI. Probably don't need to say much more. There's 2 ways that you can extend P4V. The first one is adding menu items with custom tools. So that allows you to add a menu item to any context menu or to the top toolbar in P4V. Excuse me, I have a little bit of cold here. And the other one is to add new panes with the JavaScript API. So you can actually add your whole own tabs that live in the right-hand side along with like the pending change list and submitted change list and files tabs. So those are the 2 main ways that you're going to look to extend P4V. So let's dive into adding items, menu items with custom tools. So a couple things that are good to know about as we go into them is these are going to be really easy for your users to import and export. When I show you the menus, there's just a simple drop down that allows you to spit out an XML file that anyone else can consume. But these cannot be centrally controlled. These have to be swapped around on the edge and imported and exported by hand. This is going to contrast with the tabs that I'll show you in a few minutes, where you do actually have central control over what tabs are loaded up and where that content comes from. So let's swap over to P4V. There we go. And to add a new custom tool, I just pop up to Tools, shockingly enough, and then go to Manage Custom Tools. And you can see, like any good cooking show, I've already baked something. But I'm going to show you very briefly the dialog when it's empty. So this is where you would name your custom tool. You'd say where you would want it, so you can actually have subfolders if you have a lot of custom tools, which I've had a few times in my life. And this is where you tell P4V that you wanted to add it to applicable custom context menus. This is where you're going to tell which application to kick off. So a custom tool is really focused on the idea of, I'm going to get some object in Perforce and I'm going to hand it to some tool and it's going to do something interesting with it. So that might be handing it off to a JPEG compressor for a file before you check it in, or maybe you're going to take a change list and load it up in a web application. Whatever it is for you, that's the application. This is where you're going to list the application that's going to take the object. So the key one here is arguments, though. And this is actually the thing that you want to operate on. So if we hit select, we can get a sense of all the different objects that we can operate on, and there's quite a number of them. The custom tools came from the P4Win days, so these are all the options. If you're familiar with P4Win, these are the same options that we had in custom tools, although we do have a few new ones, such as streams. So this is where you're going to select what you want your tool to operate on. So I might want to make something that works on submitted change lists. I can select that, and you can see this. The value that I select, so if I select a change list, the change list number is what's going to be passed to my application. There's some other interesting arguments options down here, a couple key ones. Prompt user for arguments, so you can actually have a dialog box pop up, and it gets this little description that you set. So say you want to kick off a code review tool, they could right-click a submit a change list and have this little dialog come up that says, pick the people you want to review, and they could just type in the names, and you can operate on them. And those get passed in through the arguments field here as well. And you can also tell P4V to refresh upon completion. So let's say you are running something that generates a bunch of files and automatically adds them to Perforce. You could have P4 refresh itself so the pending change list will be up to date. So let me show you a brief example of one that I've created here. Zoom back out. So I wanted one so that I could easily see in Swarm the change list that I am interested in. So I can right-click here and select Swarm, so it's applicable. If I were to go over to a file here, it's not there. That's probably a little too fast, sorry about that. So we'll click Swarm, and that's going to take me straight into the Swarm installation that we have running publicly for our open source repository. So super simple. I could have that take me to Jira, I could have that take me to any web tool. So a very, you don't get to see that yet. All right. Let's swap back over here. So, easy export, no central control. Let's talk about adding new panes with the JavaScript API. Now, unlike the custom menus, or the custom tools, these are essentially controlled by the administrator. You actually have to have super access to set these up, because there's a couple lines you add in the protect table that tell P4V where to find out what files to load up or what tabs to load up. So this is pretty cool because since it's in the protect table, you can actually specify it per user or per group. So if you were, say, a games company, you could have all your artists get one set of tabs and all your developers get another set of tabs. Let's see what those look like in P4V. So I've set up the central settings file that tells P4V what to load up. If I go to my View tab, we'll see that I have a few extra tabs that you might not normally see. So a really common use case for wanting to add tabs to P4V is to give easy access to web applications. Now, of course, your developers could just open a browser up and point at it, but there's something to be said when you're onboarding new developers to be able to say, hey, go to P4V, the tabs have everything you need. So you could have your intranet linked from here, you could have your defect tracker, your wiki, whatever it is that's important for your developers, you can have it all set up here. So in this instance, I'm going to pop up a tab that takes us out to our public instance of Swarm. So you can see all the people here. Qt, which is what P4V is based on, has WebKit built in, so it's a modern HTML5 compliant browser, which is very nice. And I could log in and I could do all my reviews and all that. So that's loading up a web application, or any website. I could put Google in here, whatever I need. Yeah, or Stack Overflow for us, Stack Overflow coders. Let's see what else we can do. So, since this is running inside of P4V, we actually can supply a JavaScript API to run Perforce commands. So you can actually build your own little web applications that run inside of P4V. So I'm going to show you a very simple one. This is actually one of the examples from the documentation, which just shows the 5 latest changes. So if that just did through our JavaScript API, which is supplied by P4V, it ran p4 changes-m5, took the output and formatted it into a table. Now obviously this is very simple, but you could call into your own custom applications. Maybe you want to call out to Jenkins or Electric Commander and get the status of a build and badge the build change lists. You know, whatever you want to do, you have full control. So you can run Perforce commands and then mash them up against your internal applications to give your users some really interesting data. And just another simple example of showing that you can run commands. So this is just running p4 info, all very simple. Now, when you write these, you can actually use CSS to style them. You can use JavaScript in separate files. If you look at these examples, they're doing everything in one single page, but you can split them up properly. So that's adding new tabs. Pretty straightforward. It's going to let you build Perforce-based applications that live inside of V. I think the common case that you'll find is that you're just going to want to bring in internal or existing web applications into P4V so people can get to them more easily. But they are very, very handy. So, recap, if you want to add menu items, custom tools are what you're going to go with. New panes, you're going to go to the JavaScript API. And again, all the documentation for all this is going to be available at the end. Get a link to you. Let's talk about Swarm now. So Swarm, as I said, is a code collaboration platform. We say platform because it's very extensible. It ships with the full source code. It's a PHP application written using the Zim Framework 2. Zim 2 framework. I think they say Zim Framework 2, but it never quite makes sense to me. Anyway. On the front end, we're using Bootstrap and we're using jQuery. So it's all technologies that you're extremely familiar with, most likely. I'm going to give you a brief tour. Pop back here really quickly. Conveniently in P4V. This is an activity feed that shows what's going on across all your projects, and you can filter it with these links across the top. Over here on the right-hand side, there we go. Over on the right-hand side, we can see the projects that are in the system. If we were to go in here, we can see all the active reviews that are happening right now. So it's a fantastic tool kind of visualizing what's happening in your development environment. So, 2 ways you're going to modify Swarm. You're either going to just do a pure CSS and JavaScript modification, or you're going to go in and add entirely new functionality using PHP modules. Excuse me. With CSS and JavaScript, you're really just going to be able just to modify what's there or maybe pull in content from other web apps. If you really want to create something new from scratch, you're going to be looking to add a PHP module. So let's look at a little bit of what we can do with Swarm. Popping back here, go ahead and minimize this one. So these are 3 instances. I'm going to show you 3 instances of Swarm running. These are all local Swarm instances using a development kit that I built for our recent hackathon. We actually had a great time recently out on the USS Hornet. Had about 30 people come out and learn how to modify Swarm and build their own hacks. And if you follow our blog, I'll be kind of releasing those extensions over the next few weeks. But I'm going to go back to actually one of the very first extensions I ever wrote in this example. And this was when we wanted to set up a demo site for the Swarm product page. So if you were to go to the Swarm product page, you'll see a thing that says, view product demo. And that actually takes you to a live instance that you can kind of click through and get some hands-on time with. But I was in a situation where I didn't really want them logging in and modifying data. I just wanted them to kind of click through and see what it was about. Excuse me. And I wanted to be able to provide a link so I could take them to the trial site. So at first I was actually a little concerned, like, I have to go in and edit the PHP, but I was able to do it entirely through CSS and JavaScript. So this is an example of that page. So we can see in the upper right-hand corner, I have this visit the public depot. So that's just a little bit of a simple jQuery function that goes through and finds the right place in the DOM and adds my link into the page, which is fantastic. And it also goes through, actually, and then I use CSS to remove the login link that's normally there. So you might have seen it when we were in P4V that there was a login link in the upper right-hand corner, and I pulled that off entirely. And I was actually able to go through. Normally, you can add a comment here, and this login to comment would be active, but using CSS, I can deactivate that entirely as well. So all told, it took me about 5 minutes and 3 lines of CSS, and that's with nice white spacing, and a line of JavaScript to make this all work. So in your environment, if you were using Swarm, you could link across the top interesting sites that your developers are going to need, or if, like, say you don't use jobs, you could pull them off entirely. You can style the page to fit with your needs, or if you wanted to add helpful links to make the workflow more smooth for the way your developers work, that's all possible. Anything that you're normally able to do using CSS and JavaScript, you can do here. The way it works is there's a folder in the server, and you dump your CSS and JS files in there, and the next time the page refreshes, they get appended to the list of files served up. So you can do a whole lot that way. Give another example of what you can do with JavaScript. What I'm going to show you here actually came out of our first hackathon, which was an internal-only one that we did back in March. And our UX designer, one of our UX designers, Alan Yu, came out for kind of his first coding experience. And what he built was what we call B keys. So if I hit question mark, and it brings up the help for it. And these are hotkeys to navigate around Swarm. I can use the number keys to pop between tabs. And from here, I can use J and K because VI says that these are the proper keys to move up and down. So he added some great hotkeys in the span of just 3 or 4 hours, not knowing how to code in JavaScript previously. So it's just another great example of what you can do to make your users' lives better just using JavaScript and CSS. You know, another common thing that people want to do is to be able to skin an application to match up with their corporate standards. So suppose you work for GeoCities, you could style it to fit right in with the rest of your internal applications. So here we go. That white and yellow text we all loved so much. Nice little black and yellow. It's actually vaguely legible. Now, this makes it impossible for me to show the next thing I want to do. So we'll see very quickly how easy it is to install or uninstall one of these things. So we're going to go into the public folder, which has the HTML and JavaScript, a lot of the HTML and JavaScript that the application needs. We're going to go into this custom folder, and we're going to grab the bootstraps and pull them out. If we refresh our page, sanity returns. So that's fantastic. So now I want to talk very briefly about PHP. So CSS and JavaScript are going to let you modify the application and add new functionality within the pages, but they're not going to let you add entirely new pages. If you want to do that, you're going to need to build a PHP module. We have a lot of sample code for how to do PHP modules in Swarm, and the Zen Framework 2 documentation is fantastic. I'm going to give a brief demonstration of one we're actually building right now to support what we call the workshop, or most people know it as a public depot. It's kind of going through a name change right now. Historically, we haven't really had a process for people to sign up and create their own accounts. They've always had to email us. And so one of the developers on my team, Thomas Gray, is building a sign-up module so people can come in and sign up like civilized people. Now, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen on the back end. We need to talk to Perforce, we need to create a user, we need to update groups and perk tech tables and all that. So what he's done, he's built a PHP module to do that. And so we can see up here in the right-hand corner, apparently all my demos today involve the right-hand corner. We now have login/signup. So I can click on that, brings in the standard interface. It's got a sign up button. And when I click that, this is going into our entire own page at this point. You know, this is something that isn't in Swarm normally. It's going to go into backend code that will do all the work that we need. And to install this was just a matter of taking a simple PHP module, which is a directory, and dropping it in place and restarting Apache. It was really, really simple. It took me all of a minute, which was honestly, I was shocked. It was easier than I thought it would be. So you can do the same thing. If you're looking to create pages, let's say you want to pull together a page that has all the various fixes for a certain project together. That's certainly something that you can create. When you are working in PHP, again, you have access to a Perforce connection. It's using our P4PHP language binding, so it looks like normal PHP, but it calls out to Perforce and gives you the data back in the appropriate dictionaries. And you can build anything you want on that back end. All right, swap back over here. So given that Swarm is a PHP application, this one's kind of has to be centrally controlled by the administrator. Whoever owns that Swarm installation, there's the custom modules, or the custom folder in the public folder where you can drop your CSS and JavaScript. Just refreshing a browser picks up those changes automatically. There's also a modules folder there, and dropping your PHP module in there and restarting Apache will automatically load that up. So again, all that's controlled by the administrator. Now, during our last hackathon on the USS Hornet, one of our developers, actually, Don Marty, built a fantastic module that allows people to allow their users to put their own CSS and JavaScript in just for them. So keep an eye on the blog. We'll be publishing that in the next couple weeks. But if that was something you wanted so people could have more fun and kind of customize it for their own needs, you could roll that out to them. Now you could have all those modules and extensions are configured per instance. So if you have multiple Perforce servers and multiple Swarm instances, they can all be configured differently. So if you want to get started on modifying Perforce, extending Perforce to make it suit your needs, if you go to wiki.workshop.perforce.com/wiki, hacking_Perforce, that will have all the information you need. There's information for both P4V and Swarm, and we'll be updating and modifying that page over time as new things come out through our blog, new extensions that we build. Everything that we build as part of the community team to extend the Swarm to support the workshop, we will be open sourcing all that, making all that available. So like if that sign up module seemed like something that'd be really useful to you, that'll be coming, and we'll be sharing all that code, and it will all be linked off of this Hacking Perforce website. And with that, thank you very much. If there's any questions, I would love to answer them now.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Lots of information we know. So we'll be sending out a follow-up with both a recording of this presentation as well as a link to that wiki site that Matt just mentioned. And right now we're going to take a little bit of time for your questions. So looks like we already have some in, but just a reminder, you're going to enter those using that chat window you see, send a question to staff, and we will get through as many as we can. So it looks like the first question is, in the P4V custom tool, is there a way to use environment variable in the arguments field? Matt?
Unfortunately, there's not in the arguments field. I actually think that would be a great thing to be able to do, though. I'll actually happily file that request after this talk. That's one of the reasons you would want to use the launch in command prompt, launch in terminal option, is to get your tool running in an environment that has all the options that it would need right there.
All right, there's a few questions about central control. And one of them is there anything else that can be controlled by the central settings file?
Indeed there is. So prior to 2013.1, that would be a way that you could implement you could force a lot of settings on your users. So if you wanted to increase the refresh rate or a lot of the options that are available inside of P4V, you could do it all through there. With 13.1, we rolled out Perforce properties, which is a server setting. You do P4 property, you can say a user, and you can set a key value pair, and now P4V will look at those to pull those options from there, and that's all in the Sys Administrator's Guide.
And then what about centrally controlling the settings for accepting applets from the server?
That should also be doable using that
same mechanism. So there should be a property to set that, and I will actually double check that and make sure the information on that is linked from that Hacking Perforce page. So check for an update later today, and I'll have a link for that.
All right. What about using P4JS tabs without having super access? Is that possible?
You know, when I first started this, I didn't think it was, but if you look deep in the release note, or yeah, I think it was in the rel notes, there's actually a little bit where you can specify a central local settings file. So if your administrator isn't rolling out these settings to you, you can use them yourself, and I'll make sure that we hang a lampshade on that Hacking Perforce site. Yeah, so we'll do that. An important thing to know as an administrator is that if you do decide to roll out custom tools, yours clobber's there, so they can't opt out of your tools if you have set it in the main Perforce server. But for a lot of folks, like for me, we don't use them too heavily here, so I'm excited because that means I can play with them now.
We did have a couple questions about accessing the Swarm version of the public depot, and that can be found at swarm.public.perforce.com. So we encourage you to check that out and poke around if you don't already have Swarm installed at your company. Looks like there's another question about plans to add central control over custom tools.
There's no plans that I know of right now. I do know that so P4V will likely be moving to Qt5 soon, which changes a lot of how we can do all of this. And I know that the team wants to start putting more controls in place to be able to roll out these tools, but far from a commitment. I'm just saying I know it's something that we would like to do, but it is not currently on the roadmap to the best of my knowledge.
All right, and then we have a question about debugging JavaScript code. Is it possible to debug the JavaScript code you write for new tabs in P4V?
It is. There's you'll see this in some of the sample code that's linked from the Hacking Perforce wiki page. You can actually call out to Firebug like you would in Firefox. Normally they have what they call Firebug Lite, which you can execute from any JavaScript application, and it'll pop up a little window and let you do inquiries and all that good stuff. It's actually pretty powerful. I used it when I was trying to get through all this code and make sure it was all working. So that's a great tool, and you'll actually see it's in this example code. You just uncomment the line and it all just starts working. That's pretty neat.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for questions today. Thanks, Matt. I did want to let everyone know about our upcoming Dev Talk webinar about avoiding Git bloat and submodule hell. That's going to be hosted by Russ Tremaine, who's a build engineer here at Perforce, and that's happening on November 19th. So we'll also include a link to that in your follow-up email. You'll get the recording from today, the link to the wiki, the link to the public depot in Swarm, and also a link to RSVP for our next webinar, November 19th. So thanks so much. Have a great day, and we hope to see you next month.